Please.
Okay, I think Ali's getting on now.
See all different. Yeah. And it moves fast. Yeah. Right, yeah, let me go. Hey, man, we're good to go. Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting of the Anchorage Assemblies Community and Economic Development Committee to order. It is 9:01 a.m. Thursday, September 5, here at the Permit Center. And we'll start off with member introductions. My name is George Martinez.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Mark Littlefield.
On the owl, Mr. Salt.
Randy's here.
Any other members on the line? We don't see any at this time. Thank you. And we'll start off our meeting. We have a few updates during our new business, and so we'll have some presentations later on. And as folks know, we usually start off with our regular reports. And just for clarification, the regular reports in our reorganization of the assembly committees really is about what departments kind of have a checkpoint into the assembly. And so they report to their various committees. They all always are welcome to be introduced or invited to all different committees. But so what you'll see is when regular reports on our agenda are the committees that generally speaking have most business with our committee. I mean, the department's most business with our committee rather. And then you'll also see community organizations like the Anchorage Community Development Authority. And today, for example, we'll have the Chamber of Commerce, who are also our partner organizations in the community. But we want to really give them a sense of where they can connect to the, and as the Community Economic Development Committee, those are the homes of these organizations. So on that front, we'll turn over to our regular reports from OEDC. I don't see Lance here, but we could start off with the folks who are in the room. Are there any updates from Building Services, Development Services, and the Planning?
In alphabet.
Please just say who you are for the record. Thank you.
Daniel King with Building Services and the acting building official on acting services. We don't have an update.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Craig Lyon with planning. Not too much to report from planning. We started our right-of-way snow and ice management study. We are just getting underway. And it's something that obviously should have a lot of interest in this committee along with the rest of Anchorage. But we're working with a consultant to look at what we do with snow and ice and also with just the general right-of-way and working through that. Help provide information to both the city and the state on snow and ice management. So that's about it from us.
Any members have any questions?
So, Kenny Engineering, they've got something from here, there, and everywhere, but that's the first. It's the main. Thank you.
And will that information be available to the members who you described as we may go into our decision-making season?
Absolutely. The study is just getting underway, so part of what we'll be doing is gathering the best practices from both the city and the state and what we're doing here, and then look at suggestions for ways to tweak that. And that obviously, just due to where we are in the season, we won't have any of those suggestions until the 25 summer season, so we'll be gathering this year.
Okay, right, cool. And just to note, I think it's the Utilities and Enterprise Committee is the committee that really is hosting the formal space around the practicalities of snow removal. And so I think for members, that's an interesting space for that information to be gathered as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any other questions from our members? Cool. All right, thank you. Public Works? Right on.
I believe Mr. Shea Troop is out of the office this week as well, so, and then Lance is also, so.
Okay.
Tiffany let me know that she didn't have her report from HLB, so.
Yeah, and I saw Tiffany on the line, so if there's anything from real estate that you want to share with us?
Good morning. No, nothing from real estate at this time, unless there's any questions for me.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. This is Member Voland.
Hey, Mr.
What's
Member, thanks for not seeing you.
Hey, George. What is happening with the National Archives site? I think we talked about the rezone. Is there a plan? What's going on?
Yes, so we are working on a easement document to for where we're putting the Fish Creek daylighting efforts. So hopefully we should have that completed soon. Once we get that recorded, then the rezone would be official. My understanding that the rezone is not official until we have that easement in place. And then we will be putting it out for disposal.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Boland. Thank you, Tiffany. Cool. If there are any additional questions, we'll move on to our agenda. I saw Mr. Robbins come in, and I know he has some folks here, but the Anchorage Community Development Authority, do you have any update for us that you'd like to share?
You want me to do the updates today?
Jim Weingart, the project director for
Just speak
ACA.
loud enough for folks that hear you on the
Sure. So I'm Jim Weingart, project acquisition director for ACA. We've got our EDA grant application is going before the approval committee at EDA this month. So we'll hear on that positively. And once we get the funds, we'll use those funds to do a census of all the vacant and abandoned properties in the city and prepare a business plan on how to acquire those properties and clean them up and resell them. So that's a big project. We'll use that business plan then to apply for a larger grant to afford the acquisition of those properties. So that's a grant focused effort. We've got another grant focused effort, the EV grant for electric vehicles. We've got an application that's going in this month for $10 million. Should be enough for 14 different charging locations. And the plan is to spread those throughout the community so that folks at all different levels of the economic strata can access those chargers. Our third NINGRA project, we're in an outreach phase with the Alaska Native community as to where to place the memorial that will be installed there. But we're moving forward with plans to obtain a permit from HLB on that property in the near future. So that's all in the works. We're looking forward to the Pomeroy talk today. We're working hard with them to support their efforts down there. So really excited about their project. The Midtown District Plan is ongoing, and the next meeting is September 17th for public comment. If you have comments, you can give them right directly to Melinda Gant, our department as well. The D Street area-wide plan is going to be on the agenda next month. And Daniel McKeown Foster is going to do the presentation for us. And that's an exciting project they're studying, and hopefully will lead to a lot of projects right downtown between 9th and 6th on D Street. So that's all we got. So,
That's all you have? That's a lot going on, and we appreciate that. Any questions from members? And just to note, yes, we'll have a presentation at our next meeting around the D Street plan, as you described. And I'm really excited. I think there's been a lot of good news around our work with vacant and abandoned properties and the current kind of list that is being, addressed right now, the 10 properties with the ARPA dollars that were allocated even prior to our time on the assembly that's being implemented now is really good news. So thank you for helping to continue that work and trying to find additional resources into our community for it. Any other questions? Anybody? Christopher Constant, thank you for joining us as well. Do you have any questions or ACDA at this time?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Excellent. And thank you for being here with us. We have AWU, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. Jock, you're on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Assemblymember Martinez. We got a quick update. In August, the utility got notified that we got a pretty large state grant in combination with the federal grant that we already won. And in conversations with you, what we wanted to do is highlight this particular award because it's doing a couple things at once that I think is going to be really beneficial for Anchorage. Number one, it's going to help build out some of the infrastructure and address some of those challenges that we all know or are very familiar with. And in addition to that, it's going to help improve the resiliency and fire protection for the adjacent neighborhoods in the area. So there's going to be some significant positive benefits coming from these grants. And what we want to really highlight about this as well, and this is we're going to go into depth in this in the October meeting for this committee. But this is a really great example of how the community members and the utility work together to achieve what I would say a success that neither one could have done on themselves. So I just want to thank you, Member Martinez, for allowing us to introduce it here today.
Any questions from members? Yeah, Member Brown?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. So this is probably bigger than we have time for today, but just, we're thinking about our own budget for next year. I know you guys are not on the CIP because you're not part of that whole process. We're also thinking about the legislative program, so state funding requests, and then, of course, the whole CDS federal funding process. So I guess just an ask to AWWU to kind of be proactive and let us know what you're going after so that we can make sure that we're coordinated, especially if it needs to go in the legislative program itself, so that we're all speaking to that in the coming session. And then, of course, with the federal stuff as well.
Agreed and understood. And we are just beginning that process now, and we're going to be as proactive as we can about it. But thank you for bringing it up.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we have a couple months, so we can figure it out. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? I don't see any. Great. Thank you, Jock, for the update. We're looking forward to the more substantial conversation next month. Great. Now we'll move forward with the Chamber of Commerce, and I am one of the ex officio members. Yeah, you could come on up and just be able to say and speak to your name out loud. And Christopher Constant is the other ex officio member of the Chamber. And, just on the face of things, we haven't really had much interaction with the Chamber. And so we want them to know that this is part of their legislative home base. And today is not much of a depth of a request from us, but it's more of a hello and give us a chance to see the Chamber and let them know who we are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, George, and thanks for the invitation. I know I've had this on my radar for a while, thanks to you, but There's often a lot going on that my attendance is required. I was glad I was able to make this session today. I'm Kathleen McCardle. I'm the president and CEO at the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce. I've been in role almost a year. I'll just give some brief overview about the chamber. I recognize many of you in the room likely will have even more background than I will, more information on the background than I'm going to be providing today. But there's often confusion in the community about what the chamber's role is, differentiating us from our partners in crime like AEDC, the Alaska State Chamber, and even Anchorage Downtown Partnership. Sometimes the waters get muddied because we are all working towards some of the same mutual goals for our community, even though we have separate missions. We typically do have joint meetings with groups like those. We play very nicely. We'll go together and sign joint statements, sometimes in support of legislation or priorities, but we do all stand alone. The Anchorage Chamber has been around as long as the Anchorage community officially has itself, over 100 years. It was initially sort of a business coalition of interested parties, the people who were the movers and shakers around the original formation of our great municipality, but officially became incorporated in the late 40s. Some programs you know and love and see around the community spurred out of chamber programs, things like School Business Partnerships was originally a chamber program. The Green Star Initiative was originally a chamber program. And those all tie back to our mission, which is to advance a successful business climate by attending to the civic, economic, and cultural betterment of our community. We do this through advocacy, connectivity, and education. We have several committees that are available, some of them open to even non-chamber members. We do have marching toward 800 business members of our great organization. But things like our diversity committee, our military affairs committee, and I believe our municipal activity committee. And of course, that's open to our elected folks to come and help inform the chamber about what's going on in rooms like these that we can't always spend the time in, but be able to take the pulse of all of those. We also have a legislative committee, finance committee for our organization. And we have great programs like the Young Professionals Group, which is super thriving and active program for, again, that's an open group for anyone ages 21 to 39, but those are loose guidelines. No one's carding at the door. You're welcome to come, engage, participate. They typically have several events through the month where you can connect and grow and network and sort of get a casual touch point into some of the things the chamber is working on. We also have our Athena Women in Business Leadership Program. We also have our Gold Pan Awards will be coming up in November, but the business nominations are closing Friday. So if you've got great businesses you work with or support that you'd like to nominate, those will be through Friday. We've got new programs on our radar. We definitely see the importance of students to our workforce and the up and coming next generation. We've been heavily involved in the Academies of Anchorage program, which is really going to be a transformative step into helping young adults emerge into the world, more prepared to interact in the workplace, more prepared to be successful students, and more prepared to understand what their goals are as an adult. We also are entering into partnership for a brand new program this year that we're standing up with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and the National Civic Trust to host a National Civics Bee local qualifier for middle school students. That's one of those things, local government in rooms like this, and it's just so important. And some of that information and education is definitely lost or not communicated along the way. The importance of voting, your rights as citizens. So programs like this will really help instill some passion in the next generation. We're really grateful to the Alaska State Chamber stood up a state contest last year, but this year we'll be introducing a local qualifier that hopefully we can get engagement from ASD, private schools, home schools, anybody in the middle school bracket across our community. So we'll be introducing more information about that as we build the plane as we're flying it, so to speak, but that's something we're really excited about. That'll be, you'll see that in the spring. I don't know if I have more to present right now, but if you have any questions about the chamber or me or our mission, happy to take a second to address those. And from on the line.
Yeah, so last year I got invited to speak briefly to the Municipal Activities Committee, which is great. And so, and I kind of hadn't followed up since then.
Oh, yeah.
But I realized, I can't remember what the specific discussion was, but anyway, it occurred to me that well, more generally, I think, the public has very little kind of understanding or visibility into our processes, how to be involved, right? Like all these things. And so I think that in the business community is one area where I would think if folks do have, you know, thoughts or want to be involved, that would be great. So I don't know if, more regular interaction with that committee is the way to do that, or, you know, we have assembly members involved in the chamber itself, but just putting that out there if you have other ideas for how we can, not just on specific issues, but really how we educate folks about process and how they get involved.
Yeah, that's a great point and sort of a larger question to raise. The Municipal Activity Committee is an excellent way, and we really appreciated your time. I know I was able to attend that, and it was really great and insightful because, you know, all of our elected representatives from different districts and areas sort of bring their own perspective on the issues and things that they are leaders on or that really are important to them and perhaps sort of the reason why they're seated in the office. And so I felt like it was more of an informational interview with you, but just kind of what's going on broader as well. And really some great insight. We appreciated that. That committee is sort of brings in the people most focused on that work already, or people who are trying to be. We do have those additional touch points like Make It Monday, which I know you've presented at before. Yes. I feel like I've seen you up there. Yeah. That we'll have regular updates from different groups. Chair Constant, I know he gave the assembly update sort of most recently, and that was a great presentation as well. So there's times the business community does absolutely want to hear from that, and those are things that we support. Kind of wondering if you'd like to do like a behind the scenes open house-y type thing. Like we will be planning a more of an open house reception as this year goes on to meet with the assembly, but then also meet with the people running for office at the state level. But maybe something like a business after hours would be kind of cool to bring in a more informal conversation. That's been a really popular way that people like to engage and get a peek behind the curtain and kind of see what's going on when we're not officially on an agenda, and have more informal discussions about things that maybe are important to them, or get that information about ways that they can plug in. We're always happy to share information in our newsletters. We send one out every week. If you're already on one, I hope you are reading it. We have pretty good readership of that distribution. But it can be easy to get inundated with information as well. So sort of if there's key like entry points or things coming up or initiatives, those would be great to stay in the loop when you get your newsletter as well. So thank you so much for all of that. And yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways to get involved, sort of depending on what your goals are to achieve. So just stay close. You can always reach out to me. We've got great members of the board. George, as our ex officio representative, can always pass things along. Been increasing the flow of communication on initiatives, especially that impact the Choose Anchorage priorities, Music City type things. They recently joined, so we're happy to support the efforts there kind of full bore. And yeah, just anything that's for the greater good, we're interested in learning more about and seeing how it fits into our mission.
Thank you so much for being with us. This is the opportunity to say hello, and so we appreciate you taking the additional time. Generally speaking, quick updates for us that then often turn into more presentation. Will be kind of the flow of the order, but I really appreciate you taking the time. One note, a lot of our Friday work sessions will often overlap with
I know.
their Friday board meetings. And so it's good to have you be able to be present with us. And just for the general public to know, there are many organizations in our community who do really good work. So there are many access points to participation.
Yes.
And to advocacy. And so just to give people the understanding that not all roads necessarily have to come to an email to the assembly to be able to make a difference in the community. And so thank the organizations that really pay attention to the larger questions that of which our economy survives and thrives, but it's really about those civic spaces. And just one note as a resource, if you haven't connected yet, the assembly has and our communications team, and I know that Allie's on here, we have the 101 series that we have been using in our newsletter. And so there's a lot of information that we have gathered that I think a plug and play into any modules. And I think that coordination will be well in order.
Thank you. It's always great to not have to duplicate efforts
100%.
in order to keep the same goal.
Right on. And on that note, I'll put Daryl Hess, the municipal ombudsman, also on the spot because he also is a clearinghouse of the 101 information, how to interact with the municipality in all different levels.
Thank you.
Appreciate you for being
You
here.
all.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Excellent. All right, there we have no items for unfinished business. And so we'll move into the first item of new business, which is a presentation from the school district. I know I see Jim Anderson on the line. Member Daniel Volan is here in person now as well. And so we'll turn over to the school district conversation. I'll turn it over to Jim, who's on the owl. And just the setup for this is at our previous joint meeting with the Anchorage Assembly and the school board, I know that I asked the question and some other members were interested in just understanding more about ASD's property portfolio in the big sense. And so we've invited this conversation and Jim, if you can come online and take it away, sir. The time is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you for everyone present and especially Member Martinez who invited me to talk about this. So sometime 15, 20 years ago, the district purchased 2 parcels of land, the Totem, which I know Assembly Member Martinez and Brawley are both aware of where that's at. And that was 27 acres. We had originally planned, if we ever had to build a school on that lot, to actually use about 15 acres of that land. But naturally, the population in Anchorage, declining enrollment, there has not been a need to build a school on that lot. The second parcel that we purchased was Powder Ridge, and it's over. Oh, right. Sorry, not Powder Ridge, Westlake, which is south of the airport on 100th Street. We purchased a parcel that was big enough to hold a middle school and an elementary. When I drove out in that area a few weeks ago, it looks like there's still some developable land, but I'm not aware of what the city's plans are for the areas and any growth out there. But both of those, I know that we purchased them. The more I dug into this, though, I realized that I need to go back and find out what was the funding source for purchasing this land and whether it was a state grant or something like that, which would change rules on any future changes in who had management authority. So the first 2 parcels we purchased, Totem and Westlake, and then as part of the agreement for building the Powder Ridge development, the city dedicated 15 acres in that area for a potential future school site, elementary size. And I think there's 200 to 220 houses. The last email I got on best estimate was sometime in the 2028 timeframe, depending on funding, depending on construction available, depending on a lot of things. That would be an additional 200 plus houses. And that's where that plot of land was dedicated for a future school use. And I'm not sure, you know, I did check and I know, Assemblymember Martinez, it was either you or Assemblymember Brawley, and I think it probably was both of you, who said, how would land transfer? And so the best that I can tell, and I'm glad Tiffany's in the room, is that if the board were to choose to transfer, relinquish management authority, they would do a resolution. That resolution, if assuming they passed it, would go to Tiffany through Real Estate Services, work through the administration, ultimately winding up at the assembly level for a vote as to whether that management authority was going to be changed from Anchorage School District to the municipality. I think the one piece, and I would have to work with Tiffany, first do the research on the Totem parcel and the Westlake parcel, and really confirm how were those funded, because they were purchased by ASD, and we'd have to work out whether there were grant strings associated with that procurement, and I just don't know at this time. The other potential, and I think you'll see that as we discuss the right sizing plan, when the district rolls out their right sizing plan this fall, it'll be a multi-year plan, which may consist of school closures and consolidations, probably will consist of repurposing some of those facilities for things like charter schools or child daycare centers, or portions of schools for child daycare centers and other uses. But we did close Abbott Loop 2 years ago as an ASD general education school. ANCCS, Alaska Native Charter School, is occupying that while we tried to find them a new school. And currently, we're still planning on demoing that school sometime in the summer of 2028. So it's probably not just looking at the parcels at Totem and Westlake, but also seeing how the right sizing plan comes to fruition. There may be buildings that are demoed with several other schools relatively close together, where that might be land that the assembly would talk to the board about, work with demographers and city planners to see if there's potential in the next, couple decades to have to rebuild a school if it gets demoed. I know that we do have a board member that wants to retain Abbott Loop. But my last board guidance 2 years ago was that they voted to close it. And so I'm moving forward with at least a plan at this point of demoing that school in 2028. We also have some other parcels spread throughout the city that, we have an elementary school with like a significant amount of space. I have not done an analysis of the road network, the infrastructures, whether the land is wetland or whatever, but there is potential if we started really working on this, once we get through the right sizing plan, that there might be other areas that we frankly have not reevaluated over time that might be potential for housing developments if it went back to the city. And
Excellent, Jim.
I think that's all I know, Mr. Martinez.
So
Sorry.
I think there are some questions in the room, so we'll go around for some member questions. And I do have a few questions, but I'll reserve those. Mr. Meyer?
Yes, thank you, Jim. I guess first question, I know Powder Ridge, the Eklutna master plan has some zoning in there for some schools. But I mean, Birchwood ABC was just on the chopping block to be closed until I think last year because of low enrollment. And I think both Jubiac High and Eagle River High have low enrollment as well. So maybe down many, many years from now would be a good spot for school, but I'm not sure that we need one in Eagle River now. The other question is demolition really the highest and best use of the school, or maybe repurposing for somebody else to use as a charter school? and rent from the school district. It just seems like a huge expense to go through and tear down a school, and you're thinking maybe 10 years down the line, you need to rebuild it.
You know, that both good comments. First, when you talk about Birchwood, when we talked about closing it, it's an ABC school. So it's an alternative school where parents choose to go to that particular program, that particular type of curriculum. And it is unique and different from like Fire Lake, Homestead, Alpenglow, any of the other schools in those general areas. And I don't, you know, no matter how many houses are built, it is difficult to know what percentage of houses would be occupied by elementary age students, how many families would choose an ABC program over an immersion program or a Montessori program or a regular general education school. So it's certainly difficult looking at Powder Ridge, trying to figure out when those 200 plus houses are built, whether we would need the space. I know I've talked to Dr. Bryant in depth. We're building Inlet View, a new Inlet View, and we're making it a 2-story building instead of a 1-story building. So there's certainly potential. As you look at right sizing, should be a living, breathing plan where change is always happening in the district and you're trying to use the space for the best possible use. And it might be that you deliberately close a school knowing that you're going to rebuild that school because it's 60 years old or more, knowing that it'll take a few years to rebuild it, but then you're closing another school that's at that point end of life as well. And so as part of a true multi-year strategy, I don't think we'd look at fixed facilities and think that nothing ever changes. I think you're going to see some schools be demoed and some be rebuilt over the course of time. Otherwise, 20 years from now, we're going to have more than 50% of our facilities over 50 years old. So well over 50 years old, with many of them in the 80 years. When you look at Abbott Loop specifically, it doesn't have a fire suppression system. It's not unsafe for students in the school because it has an enhanced fire suppression or an enhanced fire detection system. And we can get the kids out very quickly. It can detect anything in the walls. So it's not unsafe. But if it were to be repurposed or continued past 2028, it would need a fire suppression system. If you walk through the hallway, I would like to consider myself relatively normal in height, but I'm like 5'5" and I can almost touch the ceilings. So to put a fire suppression system in that building, you really do need to raise the roof, make the ceilings higher, and then install the fire suppression system in it. And so the question is, do you invest that amount of money into a school for a charter school, which obviously is always possible, or do you find another school that you would close and repurpose for Alaska Native and demo Abbott Loop and reserve that plot of land for a potential future new school or other use?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Member Braun?
Yeah, well, I guess first a comment and a question. The comment, I hear the desire to open up new land, and that is a common practice, I think, to reserve land for public school or for schools, public facilities. I think the challenge is if we took a policy of opening up all of that land, you know, with the posture that we're not growing right now, it would be almost impossible to find places to put schools in the future if you believe that in the 100 years in the future, this city might be significantly bigger than it is, because the government will not have the money to buy back private land, right? So that's and the more that you open up a lot of that land, the less kind of incentive or development pressure there is to reuse the land we already have that already has utilities on it, et cetera. So I think it's not an either or, but I do, I understand what we do with the buildings we have and if they are past their life. But I think when we talk about opening up land that we've reserved, I think that's a different conversation. But my question is actually, and I know Board Member Jacobs is here as well. has there been, or I guess, are there barriers right now to what was in Prop 14, the marijuana tax dedication that basically said we should be prioritizing school buildings either for, if a program's closing down or if it's reducing its footprint or whatever, there'd be room for childcare or early ed programs. And I don't know if there's like barriers, like if we can't allow a childcare program to co-occupy a building with a school. I don't understand if there's like big barriers that we should be aware of as we think about that option as well.
But the only barriers I'm aware of is we would need to change potentially Muni Code and state statute. Currently, only one child care provider can operate in a school. So if you already have a nonprofit child care provider operating in a school, either before or after school, and you were to want to segment off a portion of a wing to allow a child care facility to operate commercially, the plan, as I've discussed with the board, is it would be significantly reduced rate so they could provide reduced rate childcare because you wouldn't have the same overhead costs. You also have organizations like Head Start that a couple years from now, their building, it's owned by the Catholic Social Services, but their building is going to go through a complete renovation and they have to move out. So obviously they have contacted me. I think we would have to change the rule that says only one child care provider can operate on any given facility. And I don't think it would be that hard to change it. I was on Mayor LaFrance's Child Care Transition Committee, and everyone in the room discussed that as really the key barrier. If you could have Head Start and Volunteers of Alaska or a child daycare center that was commercially operating on a portion of a wing of a building, and you kept them segregated, if we can get the rule changed for that, then I feel, honestly, I think that's the worst. That's the only constraint that I can see with using a building in multiple ways, even if it's the same type of service.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm making a note about that one.
Thank you, Member Brawley. Just for the note, Jim, you referred to Member Brawley a couple times as related to the totem. I think you meant Member Bronga. So I wanted
you
no problem. Just wanted for the record to make sure that we shouted out Karen as well, who had been working and talking with me about this on that. One question for you, Jim, and then I think Scott has another question. Is in your right sizing work that you'll do, will we be able to acquire an inventory of all of the lands and the properties that you all have in your analysis, so we can have a better understanding of the totality of the footprint of the school district and their conversation? Like today, for example, we heard of a couple of the parcels. Obviously, the totem parcel has been a subject of many years of different types of conversations, so thank you for bringing that. It was the west side parcel is a new part of it, but I just wonder about an overall inventory so that members could have a chance to digest the locations and the possibilities as you do the right sizing work.
Absolutely. If you look at our CIP, our 6-year plan, it actually has an annex that lists every single school in it, how many acres it has, the school footprint, and it's all in like 2 pages, covers every elementary school, and then it goes to middle school, high school. But yes, in fact, our CIP, I can email you a link if you'd like, but our CIP is a public document. It doesn't mean it's always easy to find. So if you would like me to email it, I would be happy to email that to you, and you can pull up and see the entire inventory of Anchorage School District.
Yes, please. That would be helpful. We appreciate it. Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, my follow-up was, is the Powder Ridge, back to that only because it's self-interest in Eagle River, is that going to be including the land that the school district rents from them or leases from them as some of the other schools in Eagle River?
That's what I have been told, and that's what everyone believes, because it isn't owned by Anchorage School District. It was dedicated as part of the agreement working through the Powder Ridge development. And of course, we have other schools that are owned by Eklutna, and we pay very little, like very little, I think $1 a year or something, for the use of those lands. But it wouldn't be, I believe it would still not be owned by the municipality. And we currently are not the property manager of that piece of land that has only been dedicated to us in the event that the development occurs and a school is required.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions from members at this point? Great. I don't see any other questions, Jim. Thank you for bringing this conversation to us. I think there are some lots for us to expect with respect to your right sizing conversation. And I appreciate you taking it on in this particular way, because there are pressures with respect to housing and developable land in our community. And so I think it is good that we're all starting to have these conversations together. Right sizing has been, to some extent, concerning to members of various parts of our community who cherish their schools. And, the way it was originally rolled out last year had a lot of, local opposition to, and just kind of protecting the local schools and the whole idea of that neighborhood school. So we appreciate that you all are in this conversation. We look forward to the demographic information that you're drawing from, and just really having a strong, robust data set to your analysis. And on that note, I would also share that I appreciate I see school board member Carl Jacobs is on the line as well. School board member, would you like to just have a comment, or are you okay?
Mr. Chair, yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. I am just here to support Mr. Anderson. I appreciate the conversation today, and I'm looking forward to continued partnership as we continue with the right sizing convo. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, MJ, and the rest of your leadership team for making this conversation available. Jim, we look forward to continuing this discussion as your right sizing work moves forward. Thank you.
Sir, thank you.
I hope the folks in the room that are tracking the things that we need to be tracking very, very closely. Appreciate it. Excellent. We'll move forward into the B conversation for our new business, Alyeska Resort, and we have an update on project development. And I know one of the members, I think Mr. Johnson was the one who originally asked for us to have this on our agenda. I didn't see him. I know Mr. Salt is here, but I just wanted to make sure that if you all had any setup that you wanted to provide, the members who brought this forward have that opportunity. I didn't see,
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just want to note for the record that Mr. Johnson is excused from all duties this week, just FYI. He didn't miss the meeting unintentionally. He just had some matters that take priority.
Appreciate that, Chair. Thank you. All right, cool. So just for members to know, originally, at least, as this is a development in the South Anchorage District, Member Johnson asked us to open up this discussion. I also think that this particular folks who are doing the presentation have been reaching out to individual members. And so it's a good opportunity for us to collectively hear the presentation and see what's happening in Girdwood.
Okay. Just trying to get it on the screen here, but my name is Will Laurie. I'm the development manager for Alyeska Resort, Pomeroy Lodging. Just wanted to give you an update of what we're working on up at the resort in Girdwood. I know some of you have heard this presentation before, but the more we talk about it and the more we present, the more opportunities I see to work together with organizations in the municipality and all over. So I think as we're just getting it uploaded, I'll give you a bit of a history, I guess, on what we've been working on. Oh, there we go. But essentially, we started looking at development at Alyeska about 2.5 years ago now. And it all kind of stemmed from COVID. There was a big shift with remote work and moving to resort markets. People had the ability to work from wherever. So why not work in a place where you can ski, mountain bike, and enjoy these great activities? As much as we saw this as an opportunity for the resort, this was also a great opportunity to build with the community. So we started to revisit. We started to revisit the master planning process with the previous group who had done it with the previous resort owner, and really started to engage the community on what was needed as well as what was needed by the resort. And there were a lot of things that came out of that, most of it pertaining to housing in Girdwood. There's a lot of groups to meet with there. Girdwood Board of Supervisors, Girdwood Housing and Economic Committee, the Land Use Committee, and a lot of other groups. We tried to get input from all of them as we were talking about this program. So just if you're not super familiar with the resort lands, that's the resort down there. This is our overflow parking lot. We have a staff housing building here. And last year we completed a 71 unit staff housing building over here. So that was all studios and 1 bedrooms. And then just over on this side to the right of the resort, we built the new Nordic Spa. And again, as we were going through this process of planning and updating the master plan, we brought in a project architect group out of Portland, and they specialize in resort markets, and we ended up working on this plan with them. So what you can see here, and I'll go into a bit of a specific dive on all these specific neighborhoods, but right beside the resort, we have kind of a pedestrian-oriented skier village. To the left of the resort, where the parking lot would have been, I'll do that. This is called Moose Meadows Village, and it's very focused on kind of community needs, workforce housing. And then the upper area here is Glacier Creek Village, and this is focused on compact housing as well as single-family homes. This whole development, and you can see these lines kind of trickled in everywhere. So those are existing or proposed trails in Girdwood, and a lot of what we have designed has been, or we meant to work around this and work with trails. So that's the general large overview of it. As we get into specifically around the resort and what we're we've started construction on just about a month ago now. So we've started clearing for phase 1, but right around the resort, these 3 larger structures here will be condo buildings with ground floor retail. And as we were talking with the community, one of the first things that popped up aside from housing was the lack of commercial space in Girdwood. If you have a new business and you wanted to open a storefront, you couldn't do that right now, just because there's simply no availability. So those larger structures, we're looking at roughly 300 condominium units. Over here is a new conference center. So that is really just to add to what we offer at the resort currently. We've had to turn away business from Alaska, from Girdwood, because we don't have the capacity to hold these larger events. So this new facility will allow us to have events of about 600 to 650 people. We're also looking at some opportunities to work with the community on this to include an arts aspect in this. So similar to a lot of resort markets, they will have kind of a conference center / arts museum. So an opportunity to have gallery space for local artists, workshops, and things like that. This is actually the Nordic Spa here. So right in front of the Nordic Spa, we're looking to develop a new ski school facility, and as well as a small extension to the hotel over here. But this whole area will just be for walk-through and pedestrians. We've also developed a new parking area over here, and that's mainly to replace losing the primary parking lot over by the resort here, and additional parking over here. So we've started clearing utilities for a lot of this whole area this season just to get ahead of next year's build season. On the Moose Meadows Village side of things, so this is our first staff housing building, second staff housing building. All the other structures here would be new, I guess with the exception of the chapel as well. But over here, this is the new location for Little Bears Daycare. We've been working with them even before we started working on this development to identify a new space for them to have a larger daycare facility and one where the roof isn't going to fall in if a couple inches of snow falls on it. So we're really happy to have them in there. It's going to increase the childcare capacity by over 100. Next to Little Bears Daycare is the YMCA, and I know it's come out in the news recently, but we signed a partnership with them to develop an outdoor covered ice rink, a fitness center, and a pool. Because if you're a member of the Girdwood community, the current rec center is the hotel. So if you learned how to swim in Girdwood, you probably did it at Alyeska Resort. But these two aspects here, we have donated the land to these organizations and we continue to work with them through the building process. Really excited to have them in there as well. All these other structures that you see here and very much in line with our staff housing, we're planning on building workforce housing. And that's not just for resort employees, but we're opening this up to all of the employers of Girdwood. So that might be members of the Little Bear staff, members of the YMCA, but also the school, firefighters, anyone who is employing people in Girdwood. We want to be able to house them. Something that we realized very quickly after purchasing the resort back in 2019 is it's difficult to get people to work here because it's difficult to house people. And that is the same theme for a lot of the businesses in town there. And you'll often see that some of them have to close midweek because they don't have enough staff to work at the businesses. And it's largely due to the fact that nobody can find housing in town. So this whole area will have 180 units of workforce housing that will work with local businesses to make sure people have adequate housing. And what we've done here in this neighborhood as well, as we were going through this process, we worked on some surveys with our employees as well as talking with local businesses as to what kind of product they needed. Quite frankly, the resort itself has a waiting list of over 40 for our current staff housing buildings. And I think people have given up on that. So right now we really need beds. The first few phases of it are really going to be focused on dorm style, studio units, getting people space to live. But as we move back into phases, and I'll go through the phases after, but really looking at building those 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms and townhomes. Because as we look to hire people at the resort, and I'm sure other businesses are going through it as well, people move up here with families, people move up here with a spouse, with the dogs, so they can't necessarily do a studio unit. So it's our desire to be able to offer, a diverse range of workforce housing units in this neighborhood as well. There's also some ground floor retail aspects within some of these more dense buildings. We've been talking to grocery stores, hardware stores, some of these commercial assets that would be very crucial to a town. I love the Merc in Girdwood. I'm not sure if any of you have been there, but I think they could use some more grocery space too. So as we look at this Glacier Creek neighborhood, this whole area was designed around the proposed Girdwood Trails plan. The whole idea was to create a neighborhood that was integrated into trails, and essentially, if you lived in this neighborhood, you could pop on your skis and be on a Nordic trail in your backyard there. What we've also done in this neighborhood, and was part of the feedback that we went through during our community process, a lot of people appreciated that we were building workforce housing, but some young members of the community came up to us at this community meeting and said, we also want the opportunity to buy. Because if you looked at listings in Girdwood, currently, I think the cheapest unit is $850,000. That's because these units often come on large parcels of land, they're large homes, and you're usually competing against a few doctors or a few lawyers to try to buy it. So what we have proposed in this and what we've written in our area master plan, that got approved back in June of planning and zoning, is to include, an aspect of compact housing that you can see down in this lower area. And I always like to point to the example of, the development on Cordova and 11th in Anchorage, because that developer we're also working with on this aspects of this project. But essentially smaller homes on smaller lots with shared utilities, with shared services. And then looking at some models that other resort towns have used, we would look to provide first-time home buyers rights to offer a program that looks at people who have been working in Girdwood, living in Girdwood for an extended period of time that are potentially under a certain income, and then it would act as a bit of a lottery program for first-time home buyers right for this area. For the rest of the neighborhood, we would be looking at some single-family housing. And this whole area, again, written into our area master plan that we would not allow short-term rentals in this whole development, which has been at the top of Girdwood's list for a long time because there's a high amount of short-term rentals in that neighborhood. Other aspects of this development, so just in line with that Nordic ski theme, we have a Nordic ski facility included in this area, as well as additional parking, just for further access to trails. This whole green area is the proposed trail, and these red areas are existing trails, same with the purple. On top of that, just in an effort to reduce the need for cars in this whole development, as parking is also an issue in Girdwood, we have this cool horizontal pulse lift, which will connect this neighborhood to Alyeska Village. So that'll go back right beside the hotel, essentially eliminating the need for someone to get in their car from this neighborhood, go park at the new parking lot beside the resort, and you would just essentially have that gondola running back and forth all day. This is a bit of a phasing plan. I can run through this quick, but again, we started construction on this about a month ago, clearing utilities. So everything that's in dark / gold is what's happening in the first phase, and we're really looking to start this in 2025 for vertical construction. So next April, May, whenever the ground thaws. But we've cleared this whole parking lot area. We've cleared a lot of the area for the first condo building. The conference center will be in the first phase, ski school and hotel extension, as well as most of the kind of village walkway area. On this end, the first phase of workforce housing, as well as the Little Bears Daycare and YMCA. And then as you move through the phases, it'll essentially be another condo building, more workforce housing, and the final phase of the condos and workforce housing. And then after that, we would be pursuing the Glacier Creek neighborhood. So this is just to get an idea of the scale of what we're looking at. So this is an earlier rendering, but it is a good example of kind of the phasing of all the buildings. So that's the hotel right there. This would be the tram, the Nordic Spa in the back. And this would be the first condo building here, as well as the conference center right beside it. But as you see, the phasing develop. And this is also the new parking lot. You'll see, the second condo building come in and the third condo building come in. So really looking to create that village ambiance in here, ground floor retail, restaurants, new businesses, a conference center so that we can attract more people into Girdwood during the shoulder seasons. And then these are some updated renderings. So this is the first condo building. You can see kind of ground floor retail. It drops into the lower village where you'll be beside the conference center, ski school, and up to the tram. And this would be kind of walking from the new parking lot area. Another view of the condo building as you would look up valley. And looking towards the tram, so you have the ski school. There's a commercial space up top too, and the hotel extension there as well. And then this is the new conference arts center we're looking at doing. And this would be the track B area. So this would be the first phase of workforce housing. You can see ground floor retail, as well as the YMCA in the back. And we're continuing to work with community members on a lot of these aspects YMCA and myself, we're just interviewing people for the building committee on the Y, which we're interviewing community members to be a part of this so that we can get input from what they want to see in a recreation center in their town. You can see the ice rink in the back there as well. And that would be Little Bears Daycare, the ice rink in the back there. Just housing, just up the workforce housing as well.
So Willem, I want to make sure we have time.
Yeah, so I'm
All right.
so any questions?
Randy's on the line, and Randy asked to give the cue first, and then we'll go to Mr. Bolton. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. And sorry, I didn't get in early enough when you asked in the beginning, but I just want to say that, Zach and I met with the resort and the developer a couple of weeks ago and been following this process. Feels like about over a year now. But I just want to speak on behalf of how well they've done as far as listening to the community, hearing the community needs, building a comprehensive plan that takes into account workforce housing, not only for the resort, but for the community. And clearly their work with Little Bears, with whom we gave an ARPA grant last year, that's exceeding, I think, all of our expectations that it's going to materialize here very shortly. So really, just want to throw that out there that it's been a very iterative process with good quality of listening and feedback from the resort. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Dan?
Thank you. So as Girdwood is in the process of updating their plan, I guess what land use decisions need to be made to support this project moving forward? And it's the plan that's being worked on, is it allowed for this type?
Yeah, and always forget to mention things as I'm running through this project. But the Glacier Creek neighborhood is on land owned by the HLB. We've been in discussions with them for some time now about acquiring that land. And with the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan coming up, we've attended all those meetings and we submitted our plans prior to that comp plan coming through. And a lot of the community wants to see that space remain open space. It's currently, the current land use for it is a resort, which would allow for this development. And as that comp plan has moved through planning and zoning, they have also recommended that land remain developable. And that would, the two areas beside the resort, which are on resort owned land, we have full community support for. But this last area, the upper village area or upper valley development, it's definitely divided. There's a lot of people, I think, that are in the young community who want to see homes built, who want the opportunity to buy homes. And there's people who want to see those trails be built. And there's been a lot of time and effort that has gone into that trails plan. We really appreciate that as well. So there's definitely a bit of a division on people who would want to see it as open space and people who would want to see it as developable. Girdwood did submit the plan with that area designated as open space, and we have been advocating for it to be developable, as it's one of the most developable areas, if not the most developable area in Girdwood, just because of its access to utilities, the topography of it, everything associated with that piece of land. So that is going to be coming to the assembly in November to vote on it. And we're still going to be advocating for housing in Girdwood, and as a public benefit, there's only so much housing that can really be built there. There's a very finite amount of land in Girdwood.
I'll just say, for my part, I certainly recognize the need for housing. Excited about what you guys want to do here. So if I understood correctly, so I did have the opportunity to read through, scan through Elizabeth Appleby's staff report on the Girdwood comp plan, which I thought was really good. I appreciated the fact that she referenced the Assembly's Housing Action Plan. Meaningful. that. I also appreciated the fact that there was an acknowledgement that Anchorage has a housing crisis. And so it sounds like you said, and where I'm not caught up is the Planning and Zoning Commission did make a finding that this area should be developable. Is that accurate? I don't know.
I believe that's correct.
So yeah, I guess for my part, I'm just gonna socialize this to my colleagues. I'd be interested in making that happen. Thanks.
Yeah, and
Yeah, along those lines, I have a couple of questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you earlier. One is, for that one neighborhood development, do you see that as compatible with the trails plan that just passed this year?
yeah, I almost think that it provides a better opportunity and some more room for collaboration with building with trails, and yeah, we're even working with Forest Service to create a new access from our development for the Winter Creek Trail. We want to see trails built in Girdwood, and there's trails literally all over the place in winding through every developable area. We want more Nordic skiing in Girdwood, and we see this as a great aspect, a great way to allow for housing and trails to work together. When we were going through this process and prior to us submitting our area master plan, we reached out to members of trails, and again, a lot of people just want to see this remain a full area of trails. But also, there is a need for housing. There's a housing crisis, especially in Girdwood. So there needs to be a balance between housing and trails, and I think any development in the future in Girdwood is going to have to intertwine with proposed trails, existing trails. They're all over the place. It's just the nature of a resort town. And we're more than willing to continue to work with trails. We did that during our area master plan process. We reached out to the trails planner and looked at different options as we were, shifting some of their plans around. But the trails plan really calls for this forest loop, which isn't a set in stone plan. So we're more than willing to change our plans slightly, work with them on their plans, and build housing and trails together.
And just one other question briefly. You mentioned keeping short-term rentals out of the properties that you're building, and I imagine that's both the rentals in these first phases and then that other neighborhood. Can you speak a little bit more about because you also shared that you have rental housing now. So how do you protect against those being utilized basically for short-term rentals if somebody rented it out or subleased or whatever that would look like?
For a current rental, yeah, and we have a property manager on site. It's pretty explicit what is allowed within the agreements that we have in our leases with employees currently. That's a specific staff housing building. What we're going to be developing is more conventional multifamily, so it will be a covenant of the lease that these rentals won't be allowed short-term rentals. And if we see an Airbnb listing in our building, that'll be a breach of the contract. And really that'll be up to our property management team to keep an eye on. And I think we are pretty good at that right now in general. But I do not see anyone being successful in short-term rental out of our rental product.
So essentially you're willing to enforce it.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you, members, for your focus on this presentation. Thank you, Wilma, for being here with us. We look forward to the item coming. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just want to confirm that the planning and zoning did agree that the upper land that Will was talking about would remain for development. Didn't change it to open space.
Thank you, sir. Just to confirm your question from earlier. And then, so additional information as it goes forward, keep us in the loop. We look forward to the item coming before the assembly. I'm sure that there will be public feedback as it goes forward, and we'll hear from folks. But we thank you for the presentation and the findings. Thank you for sharing.
Great. Right on. Thank you a lot.
Excellent. That's a great conversation, and I appreciate them taking the time. Randy, thank you for giving us the insight about the process that you've observed. And so I'm just appreciative of that, and that just to highlight, they have also taken time, and Willem has taken the time to meet with individual members. And that's good practice with respect to keeping us informed. Excellent. Our last item of business for today is a discussion on AO 2024-75S. The S version is what we have before us. And I'll just give a quick introduction to what the S version does. This is an item that has been before the Assembly since the first reading in August. And then I think it comes back before us the second meeting of September. So this was an opportunity for some feedback from committee members, but I'll just give a high level overview of what this moves to accomplish. And just a note, I'm also into an S1 version, so I'd love to hear the feedback from folks, but I have heard lots of feedback and have been incorporating them at this point. So this item is essentially a look at the downtown housing tax abatement that has been dedicated for the Central Business District at a year of a 12-year horizon. And this begins to say, at least in this item here, it's currently written as it would extend the downtown housing tax incentive to the Muldoon Corridor Study Area. It would also change the time horizon for the downtown tax abatement from its current 12 years out to 20 years. It would keep the 12-year, at least the way it's currently written, and these are questions that I think are open for additional discussion, but it'll extend those extensions to the Muldoon Corridor for 12 years as it's written now. And the extension to the corridor as it's defined in the particular proposal that we have before us is in the East Anchorage District Plan. There's a map, the map is, the color map is a better, if we can see it on the other page, it's a nicer, page 3 or 4, oh, Mandy, thank you. But essentially, in the East Anchorage District Plan, there was a special study area called the Muldoon Corridor Study Area at the time. And so for me, it was, what is the easiest way to identify a part that has been identified in studies already, both state and local studies, to begin to identify an area to move the downtown housing tax credit from the Central Business District to another area. And so pretty straightforward, that's what this item would do. This speaks to, from my vantage point, calls for bringing the downtown tax credit or other tax credits to other parts of the city. And I'm interested in even extending it further. But I'll just leave it there for members to want to popcorn and feedback, because I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't have much more to discuss about what this attempts to do. But I'd love to hear the feedback from folks today. One of the feedback that I did receive, Mr. Littlefield asked me at a previous meeting, can't we make it bigger than just that little area at Muldoon? So I'll start off with that. In another version, an S1 version, my intent would be to do exactly that, to extend it. And but I'm also tracking how to bring this outward to one of the other points that was mentioned in our brief debate, to other areas of the city. And so from my vantage point, it was important as a starting point to make sure folks recognize that I didn't want Muldoon to get missed, and make sure that it's primarily focused from my vantage point, but it's not to the exclusion of other areas. And so I am interested in the extension of that down Muldoon and potentially across different corridors. Randy has a question, and then we'll start off with members in the queue. Randy?
Thanks, Mr. Martinez. So I had also talked about using this maybe as a potential for developing non-served, unserved AWU by AWU properties to either get water or sewer to those properties. And it may be a larger question that I want to ask, and maybe it's rhetorical, but is this tax credit or has it been effective? So if we're going to expand it, I want to make sure first that it's working, that it's effective, and we don't need to make adjustments to it. If anyone can answer that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Robbins has something to share?
I mean, I'm not an expert in this. I've only been here for 3 years, but years now. But I can say that downtown tax credit, I don't think had the impact that anticipated. And I applaud the effort to offer more tools out to the community. We need that, right? We need that to happen. But I don't think we would have to put some parameters around it and say, what is successful? Before we could filter this and decide if this particular tax incentive was successful or not. What was the expectation when we started it? There were not a multitude of projects done with this tax program. There were some condos and some things, there were some things that were done downtown, but I think that we would have to, and I think that the conversation that you started is good, because I think we should look at the entire municipality and think about, do we apply abatements? Do we apply incentives? What's going to really move the needle for us in terms of getting redevelopment done on the properties we have available to us, and what's going to get new development done? So I think this is the right conversation at the right time.
Randy, I hope you heard that answer, that response. I think the clearest way to understand that is how success is defined and why things work or don't work might be much of a very deep dive into understanding those things, but there might be different circumstances that are unique to various things as well. So it could be very complicated, but I think there's the right type of questions that we need to be able to understand in the bigger sense. Mr. Vogel?
Yes, thank you. So I'm curious how this overlaps with the item that's going to be before us on Tuesday, AO 2024-84, which is looking at the transit supported corridor tax incentives, which the Muldoon Court already included. I'm just wondering if you're thinking about expanding this, but in a targeted way, maybe that's the better vehicle. So to look at, we say in our plans, we want there to be growth and development happening in these transit supported corridors. Maybe we look at that ordinance and we think about the criteria that's involved for that those tax exemptions. Are they too restrictive? 40% units have to be affordable. The commitment to workforce housing, you have to have at least 20 residential units on the property. So the projects kind of have to be big and locked in terms of them to even apply for the exemptions. So I don't know, maybe that's something that can apply more of this pattern, this level of exemption to that document. Just a thought.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Christopher, you're on the line, and then we have Member Brawley after in the queue.
Sure, thanks. So I'm not sure if Nolan Clauda is in the room or Graham Downey, but I was interviewed by those folks kind of last week, I think, on opinions regarding tax abatement policy. And so on this one, I'm curious what the administration's position is and if they have any suggestions on improvements or whatever. So I don't know if they're there. If they aren't, that's a kind of a prep question for next week.
Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate that. And we'll make sure we track that down as well. I did hear that the administration was taking a look at kind of higher altitude of all of these sorts of things to see how they fit into their work. And I think that's meaningful. So thank you for holding that space. Member Brawley?
Yeah, I guess I had two questions. One is, as I understand it, the downtown one, basically says you can build 4 residential units. And I'm looking at the land use of that area. A lot of it is really single family or like kind of below the level of density of a fourplex. And so I wonder, is the intent, is the sponsor's intent to, for example, build 4 single family homes in that area where that's only allowed, or is it to build denser housing? So that's one question, is kind of like what types of housing we're trying to build, because 4 units is very broad, and I think that's that was one of kind of the challenges with the other one. And then the other question I had was, it looks like the Central Business District one would be allowed for 20 years, and then the Muldoon one would be allowed for 12 years. What we keep hearing is that longer time frame seems to be better. So I just wonder what the rationale is for those 2 separate ones.
Excellent. Thank you for the question.
So kind of what is your intent with this?
Yeah.
Like what do you want to see built?
Sure. Well, let me start off with the starting point of the time horizon. My general sense is to introduce things that need to be worked on, because the sausage making process doesn't really look good on perfection to start, right? And so I'd love to hear the idea, because part of what I'm thinking is these things should be uniformed across the city if we're talking about a time horizon. And so in a follow-up version, I could imagine that would be uniformly at a 12-year horizon, a 20-year horizon. And having these conversations have opened many discussions with developers and different folks in the community who have really created a better understanding for me to recognize that a 12-year at the time of the market was extremely tight and optimistic for people to even try to fit into an arc of profitability. That a 20-year horizon just for funding stacks gets you into a closer range where things begin to pencil. So your point is well taken with respect to I would want to see them uniform. The other part, not necessarily the types of housing, but let's think of the idea of how to open up the conversation for developers to see what they could bring to the table, right? And so from my vantage point, to Daniel's point, my pivot would be, Member Salt and I are looking at some other items that potentially come along down the way with respect to transit overlay, and really focusing on the transit corridors. The opportunity that I see here is the item before us on the agenda is to extend, just simply to extend the time horizon for the affordable housing and the transport corridor, because I think it expired. And so I'd like to see that extended outward to match even the extended duration of this, where we're putting this out to 2032 to even take advantage of it. The other time horizon, I think, it just moves it out a year because it expired in February. And so I think members also brought that to update that. But the point about how to activate the corridors, we can go into the particular weeds of loosening or changing those, and I think that is a worthwhile conversation with respect to the current code. But it also seems to me that there's an opportunity to introduce something that doesn't have the same level of restrictions into the corridor and see, or into those same areas and see if that begins to spurn some other opportunities. And on that note, I'm leaning in the direction of the subsequent S1 version, looking at the transit supported corridors as the way to extend this outward in the first place, so that it's not just in the downtown or in the central business district, but it gives the opportunities for developers of all the different flavors, the affordable housing and the other types of development that are possible because of this type of tax abatement, to look at those corridors as well. Because the intention is density and infill on the corridors where the transit supported identification already exists. Presumably you have more utility and infrastructure built out as well. But I also know that, for example, this transit supported corridor designation extends outward a quarter of a mile from the core of the transit. So that really gives, in these areas, you have actually a lot of multifamily fourplexes and especially on the Muldoon corridor. But the corridor is currently, I would also be interested in extending the corridor all the way down to 36th or everywhere around the transit line, primarily because on the map, it stops. And if you look at the transit supportive corridors on the other section that Daniel mentioned, it doesn't go all the way down Muldoon, although there's a bus line that goes all the way around. So I think with the new maps of transit maps, I'm interested in extending the Muldoon transit supportive corridor all the way down the line of Muldoon, and then introducing this as a potential tool for all the transit supportive corridors, and let that begin the conversation of how to activate the transit supportive corridors. There may be additional opportunities to do some overlay work with respect to upzoning and kind of making it easier to do the density and the infill and the mixed use stuff. But this seems to be a new tool that could potentially go citywide to open up people's imagination for what could be developed, but particularly in the transit supportive corridors. But that would be my larger goal of why this could be extended outward and not necessarily have to get into the weeds of how to improve the other one, although I think we should get into the weeds as well for affordable housing. But this isn't a clearer tool to just get to, there's new tools available in different places.
And is the planning department working on anything regarding transport corridors, zoning?
There's several transportation related projects going, but nothing specific to amending transit support.
Not at this time.
But we're encouraged and excited about this work and happy to help.
Right, and we've been leaning on them and relying as well. And so just to share with members, we are at time. I appreciate the go around and the feedback. Any other additional conversation or points you want to share with me?
Mr. Chair.
Christopher, you have another question?
Yeah, it's not a question. I just want to put a chip on the table that a conversation about a 20-year abatement. That is something that we really have to spend some time on, because of course a developer is going to say that's what's needed for us to get to yes, is you need to abate our taxes for 20 years. The issue there is we're shifting the tax base to other people, and we really have to contemplate the impacts of that. And then the second part of that is that geographic targeting, I don't know, is sufficient insofar as I am concerned. I think that that is an important variable, and we also have to target what kind of housing stock we want to see developed, because just a kind of a very neutral, there are no taxes required for 20 years for you if you build any unit you want that meets a minimum standard like 4 units, is insufficient to achieve any goal. It will just simply make it cheaper for a very wealthy set of developers to not pay taxes for longer. And so I just want us to make sure we're not assuming a 20-year proposal is going to just walk through. It has to be really contemplated, and B, that we are looking at targeting more effectively the kinds of housing we want to see built. That's where I'm going to kind of stake my ground in this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you for your feedback. We are at the time, but I do want to make one closing comment just to Member Constant. I would hope that there's a flood of people who want to build developers, but fundamentally, even with the current tax abatement in the downtown district, it hasn't inspired all sorts of people taking advantage of it to the deficiency of the municipality. And so I think the question is really important for us to really begin to explore in all of the different ways of why things don't work, or what we can do better to make things work more effectively.
And what we have gotten, George, are $500,000 to $700,000 condos that aren't paying taxes, and $2,000 a month rental units that aren't paying taxes. Much of that doesn't go anywhere near actually solving the challenge we're facing. So that is exactly why this conversation is essential at a kind of a deep level.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, folks. We're at the time, and so I just, for recognition, were any members of the public here to speak? I didn't see any earlier, and I apologize in advance. But if you do have additional comments, feel free to send them to us, and we'll make sure they get read by members. With that, we will close at 10:34. Thank you, everyone.